Tiff by not correcting my neighbor when he thought I was a doctor. This all started a few months ago when I met my new neighbor. He's a nice guy, in his mid-50s, a retired car salesman and very chatty. One day, while we were making small talk, he asked what I do for a living. I actually work at a hospital, but I'm not a doctor. Over the years, I've learned to keep my job description vague because the moment you mention healthcare, people tend to share every ailment they've ever had or get defensive about their eating habits. So I simply said, "Oh, I work down at the hospital in the medical field." Harmless, right? Apparently not. For context, I live in a house that looks nice from the street. It's big and stately, but I inherited it from a wealthy grandparent. I'm not rich. The driveway is cracked, half my gutters are barely hanging on, and the lawn is always in some state of almost mowed. But to someone driving by, I can see how it might scream doctor money. Fast forward a few weeks, my neighbor and I were talking about cars. He used to sell them, so I asked what he thought about a certain model. He laughed and said, "Well, just because you can afford it on a doctor's salary doesn't mean you should buy something flashy." I chuckled, ready to correct him, but then he got a call. Later, I told my wife that I think the neighbor thinks I'm a doctor. We both laughed and decided to let it ride. It became our little inside joke. I figured he'd eventually hear, through the grapevine, that I'm not a doctor, so no big deal. A little while later, he called one evening. He mentioned that another neighbor had fallen and hit her head, asking if she should go to the doctor. I thought it was just a normal neighbor check-in, so I said, "Yeah, she should probably get checked out just in case it's a concussion." I didn't realize it at the time, but that confirmed in his mind that I was indeed making a house call by phone. From there, it escalated, slowly at first. "Hey, do you think this looks bad?" he'd ask, sending me photos. "Are you allowed to write me a prescription for this? What's the best over-the-counter thing for acid reflux?" Each time, I'd dance around it, saying things like, "Sorry, I can't help you with that," or, "I'm not sure, you should have your doctor take a look at that." I tried to be as neutral as possible, thinking he'd eventually catch on. I probably should have just set the record straight, but I missed the point where it would have been easy to correct him. Instead, my vague answers only reinforced his belief that I was some kind of humble physician trying to avoid liability. A different neighbor later told me that my neighbor said, "He's so busy being a doctor, he doesn't have time to even fix his house or mow his lawn." My neighbor found this just as amusing as my wife and I did, and he didn't say anything either. At this point, it's been months. As far as I know, he still thinks I'm Dr. Bigman, the neighborhood doctor living in the big house with the bad lawn. I know I'll eventually have to tell him the truth, especially before the next HOA party. Heaven forbid someone has a heart attack and he comes to me for help, only for me to break it to him that I'm just a humble healthcare worker. Something happened, but I can't really explain to anyone. Hi there. I'm a 17-year-old girl, and I've been grappling with some memories that I just can't seem to shake. You should know that when I sleep, I'm often aware of my surroundings. I can tell if someone walks into my room, even while I'm asleep. I had a rough childhood, often in and out of the hospital due to issues with my legs, but I'm fine now. When I was around 11 or 12, my family had a reunion at our village home, and all my cousins were there. One cousin, who was 5 years older than me, was like a big brother. We would watch cartoons together. But one day, while we were lying on the bed, he suddenly hovered over me, his knees and hands on either side. He started touching my thighs and legs, and I froze. He told me, "Don't move much. This will help you." I didn't know how to process it. I had been taught that touching private parts was wrong, but this didn't feel like that, so I didn't say anything. I just felt that whatever he did was wrong. The second incident happened later when my parents and relatives went out for a wedding. We were at my cousin's house again, and I decided to hang out with his younger brother, who was just a few months older than me. While we were watching cartoons, he asked, "Can I touch your stomach?" I was taken aback and asked why. He quickly backed off, saying, Never mind." Again, I didn't tell anyone because I didn't know how to explain it. It felt wrong, but I stayed silent. The third incident was even more shocking. I was in my own home, sleeping in my room, while my parents and younger brother were in theirs. I woke up to someone pulling my pants down a bit from behind. I turned around to see my brother, sitting on my bed, looking scared, with a phone in his hand. Without thinking, I snatched the phone and saw that he had taken a picture of me. I was horrified. My heart raced as I deleted the photo, even from the trash. He acted like nothing was wrong, and I didn't know how to confront him since I had erased the evidence. I know it sounds foolish to stay silent after all of this, but I grew up in a family where boys were often prioritized. I felt like I needed proof before I could tell anyone about the behavior of my brothers. Most of the time, I just froze in those moments. Now, when I look back, I wonder if these memories are real or just something my mind made up. I appreciate all the support I've received, but I'm terrified of confronting them or telling my parents. What if they deny it because it happened years ago? I've replayed these moments in my mind countless times, and I still don't know what to do. Karen can't comprehend I don't work in the OR. I work at a level 1 trauma center, which means we handle all kinds of emergencies, and we never close. My role is in sterile processing, a critical department that cleans, repacks, and sterilizes reusable instruments for everything from minor procedures to major surgeries. Without us, hospitals simply couldn't function. One weekend, while working, I was coming back from a break and had to pass by some family consultation rooms. It's important to note that in sterile processing, we wear the same scrubs as the operating room staff. This often leads to confusion about who we are. As I walked by, a visibly anxious man flagged me down. I had my earbuds in, so it took me a moment to respond. "Can I help you?" I asked. He demanded to know where his wife was, insisting she had been in surgery for over an hour without any updates. I explained that I didn't work in the OR and couldn't provide information. "Why can't you tell me anything?" he pressed. "Sir, I don't know who you or your wife are, and I really can't help you," I replied. He raised his voice, insisting I needed to find out what was happening. I calmly told him not to yell at me and reiterated that I worked in sterile processing. Just as I turned to leave, he grabbed my arm. "Hey, get your hands off me," I shouted. In that moment, a nurse from the OR appeared, witnessing the escalating situation. She quickly ran to get security. Adrenaline surged through me as I prepared to defend myself. When the public safety officers arrived, they separated us and took my account of what happened. I could hear the man yelling from the other room. Eventually, I was allowed to return to my department to fill out an incident report. As I walked back, I saw him being escorted away in handcuffs. I reported the incident to my supervisor and completed the paperwork. I learned that assaults on healthcare workers are alarmingly common, especially in high-stress environments like hospitals. While I understand that being in a hospital can be overwhelming, it's never an excuse for violence. This was my first experience with such an incident, and I realized I need to improve my de-escalation skills. I also learned about some training courses available at the hospital, which I plan to attend. I do feel for that man's wife. I can only imagine how difficult it must have been for her to wake up without her husband by her side, and I wish he had managed his emotions better. This was a first for me, and I'm still processing what happened. I'll keep you all updated if anything else comes up. You give me an unwanted midnight concert, I give you an unwanted wake-up call. This story takes place back in 2009, 2010. When I was an undergrad at a small state college. The campus was beautiful, but getting to class was a challenge due to the steep hills. With the dorms perched at the top, if you forgot something, you had to sprint back up, which was nearly impossible if you had back-to-back classes. I lived in the same dorm room all 4 years and had 3 different roommates. My first roommate didn't return after the first semester, and my second-year roommate never showed up. By my 3rd year, I got along well with my roommate, but he joined the campus EMT team and moved to a different dorm. That's when I met M, an exchange student from the Netherlands. At first, I thought it was cool to meet someone from another country, but it quickly became clear we were not compatible. I'm pretty introverted and usually kept to myself, often playing video games with headphones on to avoid disturbing anyone. M, on the other hand, was all about the college experience. He frequently returned late with friends, blasting music and chatting away, often around midnight. I would politely ask them to turn it down so I could sleep, and while they complied, it was only temporary. This nightly disruption turned into a constant annoyance. I was a morning person, waking up around 4:30 or 5 to get my day started. I always tried to be courteous, turning off my alarm quickly and avoiding bright lights. But after months of M's late-night antics, my patience was wearing thin. When the new semester started, M returned, and things only got worse. More friends and louder music. I found myself asking him to be quiet almost every night, and my politeness was fading. Then came my breaking point. One particularly loud night, I decided to make him feel my pain. The next morning, I got up and left my alarm blaring. I cranked up my stereo loud enough that there was no way he could ignore it. I got ready for my day with all the lights on, opening drawers and doors with no regard for his sleep. When M finally turned over to ask me to keep it down, I locked eyes with him and stayed silent. I wanted him to realize how unfair his behavior had been. After a few moments of awkward silence, he must have understood that I wasn't going to back down. He rolled over, pulled the blanket over his head, and endured the chaos. I finished getting ready, turned off the alarm and music, and slammed the dorm door on my way out. I never brought it up with M, but he clearly got the message. For the next couple of months, he was respectful, wearing headphones and coming and going quietly while I was sleeping. It's disappointing that someone needed such a wake-up call to understand how to share a living space. Don't be like M, or you might just find yourself in for a rude awakening. Am I the asshole boarding the plane and leaving without my wife? I know how this sounds, but please hear me out. This isn't my usual account, and I don't want my wife to see this since it's a sensitive topic. My wife Meg and I have a daughter Jess, who is in her junior year of college on the East Coast. Over the summer, Jess worked at her university and stayed in the dorms. After that, she moved into her own apartment. We live in the Pacific Northwest and usually visit Jess a couple of times each semester, typically for Parents' Weekend and Move-Out Day. Traveling with Meg can be challenging. I'm very organized and like to arrive early, especially for flights. Meg, on the other hand, is more laid back and prefers to take her time. I try to compromise, but when it comes to flying, I really want to stick to a schedule. Last year during Parents' Weekend, we had a flight at 10 a.m. I told Meg we needed to be at the airport 90 minutes early, and since we live about 30 minutes away, I wanted to leave by 8 a.m. I woke up at 6 to prepare, but it took 5 attempts to get Meg up. She finally got up at 7:40 and wanted to make coffee, shower, and eat breakfast. We didn't leave until 9, and by then, the airport was busier than usual. We missed our flight, and the airline wouldn't refund our tickets. We had to rebook for the next day, missing precious time with Jess. Now, we were flying down for another long weekend to help Jess move. We had a connecting flight, and I wanted to make sure we left early this time. We arrived on time, but Meg was annoyed about having to wait for our flight. After our first flight, we landed at a larger airport with only an hour for our layover. We got off the plane at 9:15, and our next flight started boarding at 9:40. We had to take multiple trains to reach our terminal, and by the time we arrived, we had about 15 minutes until boarding. Meg wanted coffee from Starbucks, which was a bit of a trek away. I suggested I get it for her, but she insisted on going herself. Despite my concerns about time, she walked off to find her coffee. 15 minutes passed, and she was still missing. The boarding groups were being called, and I tried calling her, but she didn't answer. When they called our group, I felt panic. I called her again, and she finally answered, saying she was stuck in a long line. I waited by the gate, but the attendant informed me they would be closing the gate soon. I had to make a choice, so I boarded the plane. Moments later, Meg called, saying they wouldn't let her on. She wanted me to get off the plane to be with her, but I refused. I told her it wasn't fair to Jess to miss this flight again. I suggested she buy a new ticket for the next flight, and I would see her when she arrived. When Meg arrived at Jess's school, she seemed unfazed by the situation and didn't bring it up. I thought maybe she realized it was her fault, but I was mistaken. Now, over a week later, she hasn't spoken to me since the trip and insists that I'm the one in the wrong. So, am I the asshole? I still miss my husband after 30 years of him being gone. I met the love of my life in 1987 when I was just 15. Some might think it's a crazy story, but it's true. He was 18, and I always visited this convenience store after school. Being only 4'10", I often needed help reaching things on the top shelf. One day I asked this guy to get something for me. He barely spoke any English, and I had to point to what I wanted. But I thought he was quite cute. He was skinny and good-looking, and I developed a crush on him. We started hanging out by his old car, just talking. He was Mexican, had dropped out of school, and struggled with addiction. Despite that, he was incredibly smart with numbers and fixing things. I often wondered how we communicated, but somehow we made it work. Our lives took a turn when I got pregnant. I was a naive teenager, not thinking about the future. I begged him to take me away, and after a lot of tears, he agreed. He wanted me to have the baby, finish school, and marry someone good. But he couldn't bear to see me cry. Back then, we got a court date and married right after arriving in San Francisco. He found a job, and we rented an old house. It wasn't small, but it was definitely worn. He was always there for me during the pregnancy. I was self-conscious and cried often, especially when the house creaked at night. He would check the attic and always rubbed my back and feet before bed. He never let me carry anything heavy and never got annoyed when I yelled for help reaching things. We were best friends, relying on each other. But when our baby was just a year old, he left due to immigration issues. That baby, Matthew, became the best thing that ever happened to me. Even when my husband was gone, Matthew always made me smile. Being a young mother had its perks. I felt like I could play more. Tony came back when Matthew was 5 and had quit all the drugs. Those were the best years of our lives, despite the tough moments of withdrawal. I had to help him dress because his hands shook, and I cried seeing him so skinny. Matthew and Tony got along wonderfully, and we even tried for another baby, but things didn't work out. Sadly, Tony relapsed secretly and left out of guilt. I think he felt suicidal at that time. If I had known, I would have done everything to keep him here, but he left anyway. It was just me and Matthew, who was only 7 then. A year later, the police came to tell us Tony had overdosed in Florida. I spent all my savings to bring his ashes back to San Francisco. He was just 26. I cried a lot when I received the ashes, and they still sit in my cupboard. I've never dated anyone else. I still miss him, and I'm just here alone. But my son lives down the street, and I get to babysit my grandkids, so I guess my life is okay. Honestly, I cried while writing this too. It's a crazy story, and some might not believe it, but I hope it entertains you at least. Some assembly required. Good luck. This happened several years ago when I was the night charge nurse over the ICU. After a long 12-hour shift that turned into 14 hours due to a rapid response right before shift change, I was exhausted. All I wanted was to grab some items for my slow cooker so I'd have something to eat later. I stopped at a well-known big box store that sells everything from groceries to clothes. I was still in my royal blue scrubs, wearing my RN badge and my stethoscope hanging around my neck. As I approached the store, I noticed an elderly couple struggling to load a large box into their SUV. They looked to be in their 90s, with shaky hands and limited mobility. I quickly offered to help, and they gladly accepted. I managed to load their TV with little difficulty while chatting with the woman, who explained it was a gift for their son. I wondered why no store employee was assisting them when suddenly I was interrupted. A woman in her 50s, dressed in a cheap beige pantsuit, called out to me from about 15 feet away. With her hand on her hip, she demanded, "If you are about done, I need help over here." She pointed to her cart filled with boxes of bookshelves. It dawned on me that she thought I worked there. I tried to explain, "Oh, sorry, I don't work here." But she cut me off, saying, "You're already making me late. Just get it done, and don't scratch my paint." The elderly lady and I exchanged bewildered looks. I tried again, "I don't work here," but she interrupted once more, insisting I help her. As she turned away to dig through her purse, the cart mulled away, and one of the wheels went off the curb. In an instant, the cart toppled over, spilling the boxes onto the pavement. I instinctively jumped forward to help, but it was too late. The woman turned and saw her boxes scattered everywhere. She completely lost her temper, yelling, "What are you doing? Pick them up. You owe me new bookshelves." At that moment, I had enough. I shouted back, "Pick them up yourself. I don't work here." As I turned to walk away, she grabbed my sleeve and tried to yank me back. I pulled away and faced her, now furious. "Don't touch me. I do not work here, and even if I did, I wouldn't help you clean up your mess." She stood there, speechless, her mouth opening and closing in disbelief. Just then, the manager and an employee appeared. The woman quickly turned to the manager, claiming, "This man damaged my bookshelves and is refusing to pay for them." I was stunned. Did she really think anyone would believe that? Thankfully, the elderly gentleman I had helped earlier stepped in and explained the situation to the manager. The manager realized the truth and apologized to me and the couple. As I stood there, watching the manager deal with her, I noticed the boxes were not damaged. He offered her replacements, but she refused, saying she was already late because of me. She glared at me as the manager and employee loaded her boxes into her car. As I turned to enter the store, the elderly lady I had helped earlier stopped me. "Thank you so much for helping us with the TV. I'm sorry some people are so rude." She reached for my hand to shake, but then whispered, "Don't look yet. Wait till she leaves." I felt something in her palm as she folded her hands around mine. After she walked away, the woman got into her car and drove off without a word. Once inside the store, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a plastic bag filled with screws and hardware. I realized the sweet old lady had taken advantage of the commotion to snag the hardware from the woman's ripped box. I couldn't believe it. A huge grin spread across my face as I continued my shopping, feeling like I had a new petty revenge hero to admire. I think I was always the leftover friend, and now I don't want to invite any of them to my wedding. I'm 24 and I've known my friend group since college, both guys and girls. Most of them ended up marrying their college partners, while I was always single. I've struggled with dating for years. I don't share the same ethnic background as them, and honestly, I never felt as attractive as everyone else. I tried to improve myself. I hit the gym hard for 3 years, changed my appearance, and worked on my confidence. I look better now, but dating never really got easier. In 5 years, I went out with about 5 women, but none of those situations lasted past 3 dates. They all told me I was kind and respectful, but they didn't feel a spark. Hearing that became a familiar sting. For most of the time I knew this group, we partied and hung out. I thought they were my people, but I slowly realized I was always the left-out guy. The third wheel, the one they could poke fun at without consequences. I didn't quite belong because I didn't have a partner. Recently, I started working in a male-dominated field, making it even harder to meet women. I tried dating apps and had some small success, mostly with women who appreciated my fitness and music. But things would fall apart once they met my friends. In desperation, I once asked the women in my group if they could introduce me to someone. I thought that meeting someone through a shared social circle might help. They told me the girls they knew were beyond me and didn't even try to hide it. It felt dismissive, especially since those women weren't any different from me on paper. They refused to help, and I realized they didn't actually respect me. I was just the guy they called to fill space or tease at parties. At the gym, I was ridiculed for being weak, while others received praise for their dedication after hiring personal trainers. One couple even implied my life was incomplete because I was single, despite my support for them. When their wedding came around, I chose not to go. I didn't want to be the lonely one again, and they told everyone I was terrible for skipping it. Recently, I asked someone I was dating why she pulled away. She said meeting my friends made her uncomfortable. She liked me, but didn't want to be dragged into that dynamic. We reconnected a few months later, talked honestly, and now we're planning to get married. I haven't spoken to my old friend group in 8 months, and I'm genuinely happier without them. The peace is real. But here's my dilemma. I don't want to tell them about my wedding. I don't want them there. I'm scared too. I'm only 24. What if I end up with no friends later? What if cutting them off means starting from scratch again? I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I needed to get this off my chest. Thank you all for listening. I realize now that I've been seeking validation from my friends for too long. I will honor my partner, who has a better sense of people. Despite my shortcomings, I will always strive to be truthful and supportive of her. Thank you, friends. EK sexually assaults my daughter. Finds out the hard way she's been taught to take care of herself. This is my second story, and I want to share a moment that really tested my beliefs as a father. As an Iraqi war veteran, I've always believed in teaching the women and girls in my life to defend themselves. So, from the age of 4, I started teaching my daughter how to stand up for herself. One day at work, I received a call from my daughter's school. I stepped outside to take the call, and the conversation went like this. "Hello, this is the principal. I need you to come pick up your daughter. Can I ask what this is about?" I replied, feeling uneasy. "Your child has been in a fight and needs to leave the school." "What do you mean she's been in a fight? What happened?" I was confused. She wouldn't just pick a fight. "Well, from what we can tell, a boy was running up behind her and grabbing her. She warned him to stop. And when he didn't, she knocked him out cold." "So what's happening to the boy?" I asked, my heart racing. "Well, your daughter seems to be the aggressor, and we need her to leave. She's going to be suspended." At that moment, I remembered my ex-wife telling me about ongoing issues my daughter had with this boy. She had reported him multiple times, but nothing had changed. Wait, so nothing is going to happen to the boy who has been bothering my daughter for so long? Mr. Terminator, she did strike him once. She needs to learn that violence is not the answer and should have reported it to a teacher. I was furious. "So, your school is saying it's okay for a boy to grab a girl and that she should just keep being a victim. Is that the gist of it?" There was silence as the principal tried to process what I had just said. "Here's what's going to happen next," I continued. "You can either punish both or punish neither. Because I promise you, the last thing you want is me showing up with reporters to blast your school over this." I took a deep breath. I understand that my daughter hitting him is unacceptable, but I will not stand for him not being punished as well. Do I make myself clear? Yes, sir," the principal replied. "Also, why are you calling me and not her mother?" "Well, Mr. Terminator, she told us to call you. You listen to me. I demand a meeting with you, her teacher, and this boy's family. If I can't make it, my ex-wife will. If this isn't resolved to my satisfaction, I will bring chaos upon your school. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Call my ex and let her know the time and date. We'll coordinate from there." I hung up and called my ex. She agreed with me, and I returned to work. About a week later, there was a meeting, but I couldn't attend, so my ex went in my place. From what I was told, the boy's family tried to brush it off as boys will be boys, and even attempted to get my daughter expelled. My ex stood her ground, reminding them that they didn't want me getting more involved than I already had. In the end, both kids were suspended for 4 days, and the boy was moved to a different class. After that, I never received a call like that again. The moral of the story? My kid is a tough little warrior. She got a cake for standing up for herself, and a lot of love from both me and my ex.